Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Tips for Truthers. Now this one is a bit of practical advice for everybody out there. It's not necessarily conspiracy related, but it is something which I think everybody should attempt to do if you're going to actually try and learn the truth and be useful with the truth in the world, and also to try and help other people as well. And it's quite simple really. It's stay sober. Now, we can always quote the Bible on this, and say, be vigilant, be sober, because your enemy, Satan, wanders around basically like a roaring lion, seeking whoever he may devour. And it's true. This world is corrupt, it's evil, it's run by the devil himself, essentially. Obviously, God's in control, but it seems likely that we're in that little season where the devil gets to have his way with us. And if you're not of a sober mind, you're basically susceptible to any deception. Now, I speak from experience. I was one who was addicted heavily, to certain substances. I'm not actually allowed to mention what they are because you instantly get demonetized and strikes and all sorts of things when you talk about it. But let's just say green stuff. I was heavily into that 5 times a day for 8 years, non-stop. Every day. And I don't really remember much of those 8 years. Now I'm off it and sober. I quit maybe 6 years ago. And my life has been much better for it. But it's not just that. My life has improved drastically. That's one thing, and that's probably a whole other video about addiction and how to beat things like that and how to be better, for it. But the one thing which was a major improvement was my ability to think clearly and process information better, especially in relation to conspiracy theories and the truth and what the truth is and how to discern truth from fiction and corruption and lies, deceptions. And I realised while I was under the influence of whatever chemical it was at the time, I wasn't thinking as clearly as I could have been, and I was easily falling into pits and traps and deceptions which I probably wouldn't even think or consider now. Because the problem is when you're high all the time, or even drunk if that's your thing, or heavily obsessed with or addicted to maybe something else, maybe like pornography is another one for people, or TV or food, while you're under the influence of whatever your vice is, you're more easily susceptible to be deceived. That is the truth, and you're more likely to take to flights of fancy, and your speculations may get a bit more out there than they necessarily should be, which will lead to basically believing a lie and falsities which have no basis or grounding in reality. And if you're in that state of mind and you're believing these things, then you end up spiraling into a pit of depression and psychedelic over the top nonsense in your mind. It's kind of like a pit, and if you're not sober, you can't deal with it very well, and you can end up acting out in the real world in a poor way, or you can end up adapting into your worldview these strange beliefs, and I think that is a part of being devoured, by the lion, by Satan, who is out there trying to find the people who are weak-minded and easily susceptible, to brainwash them and convince them of lies and deceits which are going to lead them down the wrong path and away from the truth and further away from God, essentially. Being sober is good for your health, yes. I think your mind is far more important when it comes to the truth and conspiracy in relations to why you should be sober. And plus, if you're in poor health, that also affects your ability to think, and addictions will lead to all of these things. So my main advice for this tip is, please just be sober. If you are still heavily addicted to something, a drug or a chemical of some kind, or a thing, or whatever it is for you, whatever that vice is, if you're going to get to the truth and be able to discern fact from fiction clearly and sensibly, you need to be sober. And it's not only that. Let's say things do go south one day, and there really is a moment where it's like everything is going down, and you've kind of mentally, you've kind of been aware it's coming because of your research, But you won't be ready to deal with it correctly and sensibly and safely for you and your family if you're under the influence. You're not going to be able to deal with it very well, and that will lead you then again down the path of making poor decisions, which will lead to even more death and despair and misery probably. The idea of being sober isn't because God doesn't want you to have any fun. I think a lot of people maybe misinterpret these things as, why can't we enjoy these things? It grows out the ground, it's perfectly natural, that type of attitude. Surely God would want us to, And that isn't to say certain chemicals don't have healing properties or can't be used for helping people with certain conditions under the right circumstances. That's true, but the abuse of these chemicals for personal gain and to be high is not what they were intended for. But again, if you're not of straight mind when everything goes tits up, you're in trouble. And even if you're heavily addicted to certain harder drugs, and then everything goes tits up and you can't get access to those drugs anymore, you're in even more trouble. And you could end up being violent or dangerous to yourself and others around you through the withdrawal process. And that isn't a good place to be either. That really isn't a good place to be. If you're heavily addicted to something, then everything you do, all your decisions and actions, are all geared towards fueling that addiction. You're not making decisions anymore based on what's best for yourself, your family, to get closer to God and to be useful to this world. Everything you do is geared towards getting that next fix, and you're not in the right frame of mind, sadly, to be dealing with the truth and the movement of truth, and the truth will set you free, but and it's a long process. And I have faith if you're on your journey right now to discovering the truth and doing your research, you will lose your addictions eventually. Jesus saves that way, and he will help you drop it, and it will happen overnight. It might be a long process, but he will make you lose these things. And if you're not focusing on getting rid of them, then your attention's in the wrong place. You need to focus on making yourself better first before you focus on saving the world and other people. And you're not good to anybody under the influence. That's the sad truth, being under the influence, if you want to get more spiritual about it, will open yourself up to possession, possibly to the spirit realm, to the manipulations within the spirit realm. It can happen, and you may not end up actually being in control, and that's where you need to be if you want to walk in the truth and the light, when you want to be there. So there's a quick piece of advice for any truther out there. Please be sober. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys, and as always, God bless.